Good evening, Kaya, everyone. Welcome to this really exciting event, a bunch of speaker series that we're doing, and I'm really delighted to be your host for this one. I'm Braden. Braden Hill. I'm the Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Students, Equity and Indigenous, and you're stuck with me as your MC. But I am really pleased to be here to have a chat about a really important piece of work that we've been doing in partnership with some wonderful people who I'll introduce very, very shortly. Now, before we begin, a few housekeeping matters. Bathroom facilities are just out here to the right if you're not aware. Phones on silent if you wouldn't mind, largely because it's annoying in the room for the discussion, but we also have and I want to welcome the many people who are joining us on a live stream from across the country too, so beaming you into Wajak Budja, so welcome to you all. In the likely event of an emergency, please follow the instructions of the ECU staff who will just manifest and be there to show you where to go. It is, as I said, being live streamed and recorded so we can capture the wonderful wisdom of what's here. If you would not like your image captured, please let the photographer know or the ECU staff up the back as well. There will be Q&A. I will try and make sure there's time for Q&A. I hate it when you do a discussion, you don't get time to ask a question, so I'll do my best. And just for mob in the room, just to be advised that today's event may contain the names of people who have passed away. Now, I do need to pass on a hello and a sorry from Dr. Roma Winmar, who's our Elder in Residence here at ECU, who was here to welcome us. She sends her regards to the panel as well. But I'm really delighted that we have Uncle Richard Walley, who's going to welcome us before he begins his own panel, which I think is a really generous thing for him to do. So please, over to you, Uncle Rich. Please welcome.
Kop Kedla, Nara, Jerp Wangin Nunuk, Ninning Wajak Buja, Nara Mud Buja, Junda Buja, Junda Weirn, Jinning and Nara Kaiwa, when encouraging Wangin. Baubaruan Nunuk Wort Koluna Kalak Nubuja Nunuk Mort Mamajin Nunuk Nala Koromort, Nurkomro Jinning and Nara Nara Jerp Jinning Nunuk Yai Kaiwa. So it is fantastic to be here. We send our blessings and thoughts and prayers to Auntie Romuth to get well. This is a significant place because it's named Jundrup after the spiritual connection of Junda. And we pay tribute to that. It's called the Wajak section of the Nyunga language group in the Pinja Buja, the Lake Country. We ask the good spirit to guide us through our presentations today. And at the end of that, take each and every one of us safely back to our families at the end of this night. So, Kop Kedla Kaiwa.
Thanks, Uncle Rich. Very generous, as I said. Delighted to welcome a lot of community members here, a lot of colleagues, ECU alumni, students and staff to the event this evening. We obviously acknowledge the Wajak Noongar elders and we're really delighted to, I guess today, speak to some of the work that we've been doing with our elders in the community. This year marks a really significant milestone. It's 50 years of NAIDOC and celebrations of NAIDOC Week, a national celebration, of course, of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, culture and history. It's also a really proud moment for ECU in that it'll be 20 years since we've had our iconic Kurungul Kadajan building as part of Kurungul Kadajan, our Centre for Indigenous Education and Research, as we prepare for our move to Burrulu, the really exciting city campus that we're going to touch on today. But that's a remarkable building, and we say farewell to that building, but it's really important to reflect on that. It's a stunning architectural building and beautiful colours. I will say, though, having been working in that building, it's functionally a nightmare, but it is a really great expression of our commitment as a university. This is the first event, as I said, in terms of our NAIDOC speaker series, and it aims to foster respect, truth-telling, and conversations about self-determination, which is topical in the university sector at the moment. So we really wanted to have some dialogue with you all about that. The NAIDOC theme, the next generation, strength, vision, and legacy, is a really important theme, and it's one that we want to reflect on in relation to a really important piece of work that we're going to reflect on today from ECU, our cultural narrative framework. So the intent is that this event is going to give you some deeper understanding of what that cultural narrative framework does, what it means, and the importance of it to the communities that we've engaged with in pulling it together. And you're going to hear from largely the architects who've made that happen with architects in an actual building. So we're going to explore some of that. But I guess it's also a time to have some bold conversations, opportunity to hear, as I said, from wonderful people who've thought about this deeply. We know in the community there's a lot of really interesting conversations about country, particularly things like welcomes to country, acknowledgements of country, what's the importance of that, why do we need it, etc. We're going to touch on some of that. So any panel that's run by Braden, there's always really difficult questions that get asked every now and then, and some tricky conversations, which are important to have, I think, in truth-telling. So I think it's really important to think, how do we move beyond gestures and the tokenism? And I think there's a lot in the conversation about that. So we're really going to delve into that. I'm making a lot of promises here, so I hope I can match up to it. But as I said, I want to touch on ECU's cultural narrative framework. I really do think it's a really important document and one that's quite unique, but I think it's a really important piece of leadership that we've engaged with. So led by Clothilde Bullen OAM, sorry, I can't just say Clo, because she's got fancy acronyms after her name, as does Richard OAM, Richard Walley OAM, Dr. Richard Walley. I also want to just acknowledge that we have our Vice-Chancellor, Professor Claire Pollock, who's joining us. I forgot to do that, sorry, Claire. And Dr. Robin Walley, who's an ECU ONDOC as well. I want to extend my respect to her as well. Now, at the heart of our framework is something called the life layers. And so it's a story, a narrative that's been gifted to ECU from Whadjuk Noongar elders. And it represents unique aspects of Noongar knowledge systems and worldviews. So at the top, we've got, I think we had a spiral somewhere there. It'll give you an idea of what we're talking about. So at the top is Jindawara, which is the stars, Mort Budja, which represents ecosystem, Karda, which is hills, Kiep, which is water, and Yada, which is the subterranean. Now, we're going to delve into what these mean in a little bit more detail, but I think it's a really helpful framework for any organisation to think about how you might embed Noongar or Indigenous concepts when it comes to decision-making, to governance, to leadership, to relationships. So it's a really important offering. So our speaker series will be shaped around these themes, and so tonight we begin with Yada, the subterranean life layer. We're going to explore what that means, particularly how it manifests in practice, and offer, I hope, some deeper insights into some of the really foundational cultural narrative work that we've been doing. So I'm going to make the awkward transition now over here.
So I'm going to start with Dr. Richard Walley, AM, who's a Noongar leader, performer and cultural ambassador dedicated to promoting Aboriginal culture through the arts, education and advocacy. His contributions span music, dance, visual arts, writing and leadership, including as chairperson of the Aboriginal Arts Board. In 1976, Richard performed the first contemporary public welcome to country, and he's the director of Aboriginal Productions and Promotions, a family business delivering cultural awareness. Now, he was super important to the work we did as part of the ECU City campus and was brought on as our lead cultural advisor and did some extraordinary work we're going to touch on. There's a whole bunch of other things that I'm not going to go through, but this one I really like. In 2015, Richard was named a State Living Treasure from the West Australian Department of Culture and the Arts for his lifetime contribution to arts and culture. And I think that must mean you're worth more in your way to gold then, right? If you're a living treasure, you must be. That's quite impressive.
Well, the alternative to living treasure is probably buried treasure, which I'll take the living treasure anytime. And titles are funny things because you get these titles and then you try to analyse them and think, well, what did I do to deserve that? And you find that most of the time it's a collective. And exactly the conversations we're having now, by putting things together, the first thing you do is to see who you need around you to make sure it works. So building a team it is always the first thing that I do when I work on any project whatsoever. So with the within you get accolades, you'd always find it's not only myself but everyone saying it's a boring statement, but it's not just the one person; it's a team that actually get. And in our culture, that's that's how we move as a group of people. We move as a collective. And I use the analysis of the flock of birds, which changes the formation as it flies. So there's different leaders that'll go to the front. That'll take the heavy lifting, and then you can come back. So don't be afraid, if you're in charge of a project, to take a seat back and let someone else be in charge of an area where they're the expertise on.
Brilliant, thanks. Please welcome Dr. Richard Walley. So next up we have Clothilde Bullen, who's a Wadandi Barimaya curator, writer and arts leader and administrator. Just let me shuffle my papers. Chloe's currently the manager of our arts, culture and collections here at ECU, a really fantastic art collection we've got here. Chloe's thinking about how do we really breathe a lot of life into that. She's the chair of NAVA, the National Association for the Visual Arts. Previously the curator and head of Indigenous programs at the Art Gallery of WA and senior curator of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander collections and exhibitions at the Museum of Contemporary Art Australia, with 3 decades of work in the visual arts. Chloe's recently been recognised with an Order of Australia Medal for services to the arts, specifically Indigenous art. So please welcome Chloe. Okay, so we're going to begin the discussion thinking about the cultural narrative framework, and it really did come from our conversations with the university about the city campus. So I might start there if that's okay. And I just want to say I've been part of those conversations and super proud to work with both of you on what I think is a really extraordinary outcome and what will be an even more extraordinary outcome as we go ahead. So Richard, the new city campus architecture was developed in consultation with you and the elders, and you and Robin did some amazing work with us on that. Can you tell us a little bit about the life layers, where that concept came from? Tell us a bit more about them and what they relate to, just if you can share with the group.
Yeah, the life layers was, it's one of those outcomes of the collective discussions and consciousness. So we got a group of elders, and those elders were not just Whadjuk elders. They had association with Edith Cowan or the Mount Lawley Teachers College in some way, shape or form with that area. So they were relevant to the building and the establishment as a university. And each and every one of them spoke about different experiences. And those experiences were all positive experiences, which is really good. But they also mentioned the different layers. So you're talking about layers. And everything comes in layers. So with our culture, in Aboriginal culture, we have the 6 directions. You have the north, south, east, west, up, down. So that's very important, because the sky is a big part of our being and our stories, but also so is the ground and the underground on that. So when they looked at putting together levels, it was talking about layers. So rather than layers this way, we look at the layers that way on the thing, and started with the subterranean. So he said it's very important what was underneath the ground, because in our culture, subterranean is extremely important, because subterranean, we say, hold the old water. So we have 2 waters, the new water and the old water. New water is the one to see on the lakes and the rivers where the rain comes down. But when it seeps down, it goes into the subterranean streams. And that creates life under there. But also what it does, it helps the taproot systems and all this. Every seed that comes, that we have on this planet, starts from under the ground rather than on top of the ground. And I hope there's no botanists there. They're going to say, well, we got moss that grows on rocks, and we're not going to. We're just talking about the majority of the trees and all those. So that subterranean was the very important. So starting with subterranean was quite natural. Then we used the layers, of course, and then up to the ground, and then the water level on the ground, and the hills, and et cetera, et cetera. But anything that has got any worth, or sort of go to what's below the surface, create your foundations. That below the surface is always the most important part, and has always been a part of our culture, and we call that the unseen. So the unseen is very important, because all the root system that goes under the ground holds the trees. they're the unseen. People see the trees and you get the benefit of the fruit, but it's the roots that's actually the strength. And that equates to people. It's our experiences with us. It's the unseen that people don't get. They may see the outcomes. They may see us in the soup, but they don't know what we've experienced. They don't know what the roots or the unseen or the under the surface thing. So that's basically a philosophy into practical application.
Thanks, Richard. I think what is unseen is often what determines where things go and how things proceed. And so I think the acknowledgement of that in this framework, I think, is really powerful for all sorts of reasons. I just want to pause for a moment because Chloe, you might have seen Chloe's face for a second. Her brother from the East Coast has come here as a bit of a surprise. Now, Professor John Bullen is the DVC Indigenous at Griffith at the back there. And so I just want to make sure there's a bit of a wave and it's not awkward afterwards. So welcome to you, John. They're both a bit shy, so they would have hated that. Now, Chloe, the other important narrative is the Birria Yok Biddy that complements life layers. Do you want to touch a little bit on that and then tell us, given what Richard's been talking about, how are we making this framework come alive at ECU and more broadly? What's some of your thoughts on that?
Well, thanks for that surprise. I'm a little bit perturbed by it. But I'll focus for a minute. I mean, the first thing I do want to say is, and I mean this very sincerely, it is such a privilege to actually have this level of thinking and work that's already gone into something that you can build on. You know, what Richard and Robin and elders and community have already done in terms of creating what emerges out of architecture as a really fundamental narrative to Boorloo and to this place is nothing short of incredible. So to be able to have the privilege to actually build on that is really a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So I want to say that. And I also want to say that, when we talk about intergenerational, we talk about building a community, I think I met Richard when I was like 20 years old, when I used to run a commercial gallery. And it was many decades ago. And aside from the millions of very bad jokes, and particularly dad jokes that Richard has forced upon me, the reason I was able to even write something like this or come up with something like this is because of the amazing sort of cultural learning that I have received from Richard and from people like Shane, of course, Shane Pickett, and other members of our community. So it is really important that I recognise that work does not just come from me, but it's come from a whole range of people. So going back to the question, what was the question again? Now I've forgotten.
How are we going to make this be a really meaningful, effective framework?
So I think my background is in storytelling, essentially. I'm a curator of visual art, but what we do in visual art is storytelling. We create cohesive narratives that speak to people's experiences. Essentially, that is it. What we all want and need is to see ourselves reflected in what we see in the outside world so that we can connect with one another, so that we can understand one another better, so we can feel like I'm part of this. I have a place. I can identify that. I belong. That's really what everyone wants. So the way that this cultural narrative can do that is by invitation. It's by inviting people in to kind of go, I can see myself reflected in this. I can see that I have work that I can do that speaks to these concepts. We're talking about subterranean here. We've started off with Ngara, with subterranean. I mean, in essence, this is the thing that sits at the heart of all of us, right? All of us have a set of values, a set of beliefs or principles that we live and we are guided by. And that's where we needed to start. As Richard said, that living water, the water that sits at the heart of us is the thing that makes us bring everything to the table. So if we think about it like that and we think about the different levels, you'll start, as we move through the speaker series, you'll start understanding how they all connect to every bit of the work that, I know there's people not from ECU here, every bit of the work that can be done, across the board in all of our schools, in our areas, in our divisions, in our lives. So in some ways it's a deceptively simple document, but the stuff in it has been built on from Richard's work, from working community, from what we believe as Aboriginal people is important, but what we also believe is important to all humans in this place. And that's the beauty of this. It is a genuine invitation, much like a welcome to country. It is a genuine invitation.
Thanks, Chloe. You mentioned welcome to country, so we're gonna flow with that question. So, Richard, I'd like to get your thoughts, given you and Ernie Dingo are really important into the creating and pioneering of the contemporary welcome that we see now today. Bit of controversy around it, some ugly, some disturbing, some just uninformed. A lot of people sort of saying, why do we need to do this? This feels really tokenistic, etc. What are some of your reflections on that? And before I, because I sprung that question on you, I know, but before I give you some time to think about that, I found in the Perth Gazette from 1833, the title says Native Corroboree at Perth. And it talks about a ceremony where Whadjuk Noongar elders welcomed, Whadjuk Noongar men welcomed a bunch of Minang men from around Albany. And it's documented by a whitefella newspaper about how ceremonially important it was for these Noongar men to be able to do that ceremony welcome. And it was a whole kind of spectacle about it. And it was really interesting. They said, the novelty of the corroboree is well worth seeing, but much of its interest is lost on us. Not much has changed, I think, but that's certainly not the case for all. Now, Richard, your thoughts on the debate that you hear, and you've spoken about how contemporarily this is an evolution. Just some of your reflections on that would be really wonderful to hear.
There's the opening remark I'd have is lost in translation. When you do a welcome to country, people think that it's in a Western contemporary sense of let's check your visa before you enter into our area. That's how it is. But it's actually, every time even tonight, what I do when I do a welcome, just say, may the good spirit watch over us. Tell which country you're on. You're on this country, the Whadjuk country. And so it's really a blessing of an event, because in our cultures, we strongly believe that you only go to someone else's country for two reasons, good or bad. And if for good, may you take your time, may you have a good sleep, may you have a good rest. And of course, we believe in karma as well. So if you're there for the bad reasons, the good spirit's watching you. And we believe that with karma, and I've seen lots of this over the years, where people have not done the right things, and people say, you can put people in jail or whatever, but karma takes its own justice. So that's been around for a long time. So if you're coming to our country and you're not doing the right thing, and this was us as Aboriginal people first, before white people came around, this was us as Aboriginal. So you're coming in, the good spirit's watching you, you do something wrong, and you're going to pay for it, because the old people are going to take justice that way. So that's what it was really about. That's really the essence. So we've been doing that, as Braden showed, in that for many generations. But how we got to do it was, there were two Cook Island dancers and two Maori dancers, and they were called the South Sea Sensations. And in their language and their culture, as you know, in the Maori cultures and the Polynesian cultures, they really respect other people's country. And they know they can't go to someone's country or perform or even talk on someone's country unless they're welcomed in And you'd see this today, it's still that strong ceremonial connect. Well, because they were performing here on Whadjuk country and we were performing at the same event, they asked for a welcome. They said, can you do a welcome and a blessing for us because we can't perform until you do this. They didn't feel comfortable. And we were very good friends with them as well, so we got down and had a good talk. And, so I did. But I rang my mothers and fathers and said to them, so these fellas want to welcome. They said, well, give it to them. You know what it's about. And I was blessed because I was brought up with in the communities and where we saw people coming from other parts, whether it's Menang or Hewitt or even Yamaji and Injabundy coming down. People came from different areas, and our mob would meet them and talk to them and tell them about the place before they bring them in. No one walks straight in and says, I'm here. Yeah, unless you're a welfare officer. But everyone else had respect. So that's the gist of how it was. So when I did that at that time, there was a fellow called Alan Hines that saw it, and he was the head of the Northern Territory Tourist Commission. And Alan said, look, I've got some people coming down from Darwin next week for the tourism convention. Can you do a welcome for them? And not only did he have Aboriginal people, he had a fellow called Ted Egan who's a part of that as well. And Ted was a very big character and a fantastic person. So when I was doing the welcome for the Aboriginal people, Ted said, hey, I want to be welcomed as well because I feel this is not my country. So he took part in that welcome. So that took place a couple of times with the Northern Territory Tourist Commission. Then the Australian Tourist Commission saw that and says, we've got an Australian event coming along and would you be a part of that? And I'll finish up by telling the poignant one. The Miss Universe pageant was going to be here in 1979. And they said, we'd love a welcome. But they didn't really want the welcome. They wanted the spectacle of Aboriginal people bouncing around with colourful paints and exotic music and this. So they wanted the exotica rather than the spiritual connect. So I said to them, look, a welcome is a spiritual thing. It's about, listen, don't worry about the spirit. Yeah, just give us some good footage and some images so we can just, can you cut it down to 3 minutes? Well, yes, we can, but this is, with the 3 minutes, we can talk. But no, we need the dancing as well. You need to bring this. You said, well, we're compromising here, but we won't do a welcome, we'll just do the dance. But we're going to call it a welcome, this is. So what happened is that we did our presentations, we walked away, and about 10 minutes later, the stage collapsed and all the Miss Universe pageanters fell down. So Perth made the news around the world about a stage collapsing with the Miss Universe pageant. So karma came. That was the first one. The second one they did, they said, well, we need you to do it again now. And this is that cool little old sombrero, isn't it? It's called something else now, Bayside, next to the Bayside Kitchen, I think it's and they had the models going up and down this glass walkway. And of course, some genius they paid a lot of money for said, well, it'll be fantastic if we put fog across it. And two things happen, of course. Fog creates moisture, so the models were slipping, and it also, they didn't find where the stage started or finished. So you can see the calamity that came out of there. So we just saw this as karma. So, you don't take it for granted. So every welcome, and I'm sorry it's a long answer, but everything is a story, Braden. It's a story. So, every welcome we do has been by request. So you've never seen us do a welcome by demand or command. It's by request. So when people says, I don't need to be welcome to country, well, no one's asking you. You're probably not even welcome to your brother's party. So okay. You always get people out there, and I always say, don't try to justify things. It is what it is. So there is controversy about people says we shouldn't have the welcome, we shouldn't have the flag, or we shouldn't have this. what I always find is I'm not worried about what people should do. I request where the goodness, because what we find in this country here, I firmly believe that 97% of us are decent people, and us 3% have to appeal to that decency. And that's what we're looking at. We're appealing to decency. So in debates like this, it should not be up to people like Braden, myself, Chloe, or Robin, or any of us to justify a welcome. It should be the rest of the community saying, well, we feel as a part of this, because you are the Ted Egan's, those who are saying, well, it's not just an Aboriginal thing. We are living here as well. We believe in the spirit of the place. We feel the spirit of the place. And we'd be happy to have this ingrained. That's a long answer to that one question. I'm glad you only got 15 questions tonight, Braden.
So what I take away from that story is beyond the first instance, it's whitefellas' fault. So essentially it was meeting a real interest, right? But I think it's such a helpful framing for people who are entirely new to that conversation. I think about many international visitors who might arrive to Australia and see this debate, and that's their first encounter with the importance or the significance or the request and invite. And so I appreciate you sharing that story, because I think it's one that gets talked about a lot, but not in depth in a way that's constructive. So I appreciate you sharing that. Chloe, I know you have some thoughts on this too.
That sounded like an evil laugh, and we're at a function that's very nice. So I'm going to be nice. A few things. Number one, I think when people say, well, that only came in then and blah, blah, blah. One, they haven't heard what Richard has talked about, which is that it's a traditional thing that has happened for literally thousands of years. Number two, our culture is not static. No culture is static. Every culture is dynamic, which means it changes, and it changes in response to other things that it comes into contact with. So to expect that Aboriginal culture is static and that we either didn't do anything for thousands of years, or we did, but it's not the same thing, and now it's looks like this, is ridiculous. We should not have those expectations placed on us, because every culture is dynamic, ever evolving, changing in response to the modern world. Thirdly, I don't see anyone taking offence at signs at the airport going, welcome to wherever you go to. I don't see anyone taking offence at, there's shouldn't swear, forgot. I don't see people taking offence when, in places around the world, you'll have them in McDonald's, you'll have various plaques saying, welcome to this place that you're at. No one gets mad about that. So why do people get so offended by blackfellas in this country welcoming people to country, to this place? And there are a couple of really obvious reasons for that. And one is straight out racism. There is structural racism in this country that we do not acknowledge, that we do not deal with, and that is the big elephant, the white elephant that sits in the room. So that's one part of it. The second is the history of this country, and the fact that this country, we had sovereignty, we had land previously, and that is not recognised. Despite Terra Nullius being overturned, that is not recognised. So when we are welcoming people to our country, there is an immediate response from colonial society, settler society, that goes, but hang on, this is our country. Because there's this act of possession that happened so many years ago that is still deeply ingrained in the culture that exists here in Australia. That's bottom line. I'm being really plain when I say that. And if that makes people uncomfortable, or if that is not palatable, unfortunately, that's kind of bad luck, because that is the reality of it. So there's multiple things that we can do. Part of our job, and part of the job of the cultural narrative, taking it back to that, is around bringing people in. I'm not a cancel culture person. I don't believe in calling people out and making them pay for something that they did or said or whatever. I don't believe in it. It is not our way the way that I have been taught from a community and cultural perspective from people like Richard is that you call people in. You call people in. If they have done something, you bring them in and you speak to them and you tell them why, but you don't call them out publicly in front of people. So part of the cultural narrative and part of the reason it exists is, I guess, as a structural kind of strategic framework is so that it gives us an opportunity to call people in. We're not calling you out. We're saying invitationally, come into this, ask all the questions you want, work with us on this. We're not going to call you out for not knowing, but what we want you to do is to open your heart up and go and not be stuck in that position. Like your culture needs to be dynamic as well and move and go, I'm not stuck in this place. I can hear, I can listen, I can change my views if I need to, essentially.
Thanks, Chloe. So one of the really interesting things about the framework is that it's been adopted already by a number of areas of the institution. I think you've been really pleased as we have been. So people in culture are thinking it through in terms of staff onboarding and behaviours. So they're thinking about what that might look like. Student Life have done a piece around orientation for students and that student journey. I know Marco in International is contemplating something around the global partnership. So it really is taking off, and I think people are taking up that invitation, understanding that Noongar concepts are ones that can be shared and are global and expansive in their application, just like Western knowledge is, right? I think often people think quite limited ways, it's Noongar, therefore it's just about blackfellas. But I think what's really great about this is a framework that enables people to think about how they might apply it. What's excited you most in that work that you've seen, Chloe?
Yeah, I think it's what's been incredible about being in a university setting, because I do come from a arts institution setting, is the critical thinking that takes place in these spaces, and that it's not only allowed, it's encouraged. And so anyone that, I saw Liz, you're sitting there, and, Liz and Liz Beresford has had lots and lots of conversations about how this approach might work in a very lateral way to, some of the things that you're doing across orientation and, student life and that sort of thing. There are a million ways you can apply this framework. What I've loved and what I've felt really proud about is seeing other people go, oh my God, this will work for me, this will work for me, this will work for me. And thinking really laterally about how you embed subterranean, how you when we talk about Carter the Hills or, Mort ecosystem is a really good concept, because what it is, Mort is, family, but it can mean like that sense of community. It can mean your relationships, how you work to de-silo across the university and create a whole bunch of new relationships that might not have existed before between schools, between areas. And that's what's been incredibly encouraging, that kind of cooperative, lateral thinking about how it's embedded.
So do you think it's a document that seeks transformation, evolution, decentering, or complete overhaul? How would you describe it? Or is it up to the individual? And then I'm going to come to a question for Richard about one of the agendas the government's setting.
Oh, that feels like a test. It's a hard question. If I were to say anything about it, I think I would say that it's, this is going to be, it might be a bit controversial, but I would say it's indigenising. And I feel uncomfortable when I say that, because so many people have a weird thing about that. But what it in essence means is acknowledging that white culture, Western culture, does not have to fundamentally be at the heart of everything, and that actually many, many other cultural groups hold values that we can also hold and embrace and have a really great time under. So I think indigenising is probably the word.
The idea that it's decentering whiteness or Western epistemologies at university is a really interesting idea. And Aileen Morton Robertson talks about how whiteness is it's actually not invisible when you look hard. right? When you look hard at, you can see the ways in which it shapes power and knowledge and the values of institutions. So I guess this is about asking or inviting people to think a little bit differently about that. Now, Richard, the Commonwealth Government, and this is you helping me with my homework, the Commonwealth Government wants the universities to think about how do you put First Nations matters at the heart of everything we do. What does that look like and mean to you? If we were to reach that goal as a university, bunch of universities, or particularly here at ECU, what would that mean and look like to you?
I think the most important thing about Aboriginal ways of education as composed to the non-Aboriginal way is that we have what we call passive learning. Now, passive learning means you acquire skills and knowledge from those who have it in such a way that there's stages and they take you through this passive process. And that process may be 6 months, it may be 6 years. It depends on the individual of how they absorb that knowledge when they're participating in this process of learning, in this passive learning. The Western way is stress knowledge. It's stress learning because you come into a university in a structure where you have to meet a deadline and a criteria. That gives you stress. So you're not going to get the best out of people when they're under stress. So that's a difference in it. How do you bring then that passive learning into a stress situation? And university is really oxymoron like that to say, you come here to free thinking and we want you to be innovative, but stay within this criteria and within this timeline with your free thinking, otherwise you won't pass. Because you've got to free think the way I free think and the way the free think before, otherwise you don't meet the criteria. Whereas I was brought up, and we was brought up in the Aboriginal way, when the first thing I asked my elders, my fathers and mothers and that, I'd say, why did that bird do that? And they'd say, what do you think? What do you think does not come into university students. It's what I think or what we think. What do you think allows us to make our spiral grow because we absorb new energies and new ways of doing things. So I think that is starting to be now more looked at in places like university to thinking, this person did really well all during that semester. They were fantastic. They turned up to every session. They participated. But because they didn't have the capacity to deliver in this style, in this time, under this format, we can't pass them. So I think that's just a simple one, and I can start to go on with other areas. Because I was very blessed to be brought up in what we call a series of codes. And you have to understand that codes are learning processes. The 6 seasons is a code. If you understand, first of all, that it is a code, then you can understand how you can decipher the code. Once you decipher the code, you can then operate with the code. Then you can actually then adjust and take that code to another level where you can design a code that's going to come in for the next generation. So those sorts of systems, I believe, should be ingrained into the university system. The 2 things I always tell people Aboriginal culture is based on, it's based on spirituality and logic. That goes into that sort of quantum physics as well, where into that quantum physics world you've got the particle and the wave. Aboriginal people are in the wave. The non-Aboriginal people are in the particle, the asset, the hard part. That's that part. How do you get a combination of both? If you get the best of both worlds, you're going to get something that's going to make sure that it's going to benefit a society. So we had learning systems in universities that balance a society. So what a society does in a civilization, they try to build up a process so that everyone is not necessarily equal, but everyone has a place and are accepted. And if you get to that level where everyone is accepted and there's respect for each other, then you take it to the next level. Not only is everyone accepted, every animal and every plant is respected because it's a part of our system. And that was a part of our society. That was our universities. It was teaching from our early age that we had a Burunga system. So my role as an early age was to look after a particular tree. Not all the forest, just that tree. My cousin had another tree. My brother had another one. So between us, we covered that. So my tree, and I tell people, it's a she oak. So what it does, and not only I have my family here, but if Braden in his family's got someone who's looking after the she oak as well, we have a she oak connection. I've got children who've got totems like the magpie. They connect to other magpie people. So you can see what we did. We built a society and a knowledge system so that everyone had a connect, not only to your family and your structure or your tribe, but to your connecting groups and that responsibility. And that was an education system that went in a passive process in a series of spirals that gave you 1, then 2, then 3 totems, then what we call a duck system, so you're in charge of an area that you're qualified in. So we had this levels of processes. And when I used to say settlers, but they were unsettlers, came around, they didn't understand the system. And ignorance and arrogance did not take advantage and opportunities when they first came in contact. The first question I'd have asked if I came from England, which is full of disease, the jails are full, corruption, inbreeding, the whole stuff happened. I'm not having to go at the royal family for inbreeding, so please. But that's what the system, people married first cousins and they kept and all that. So you came from a society that was dysfunctioning and brought a set of rules and principles from that dysfunctioning society to one where we had no jails, no orphans, everyone was healthy. We had a genetic system that was structured in such a way that you don't marry into your family till 6 generations, so the bloodline was pure. So we had these systems that were here, they were in codes. And the difference was we didn't write them down like the other societies, whether it's the Incas or the Egyptians, they inscribed and so. It was ingrained in us. It was here. It was in our DNA. It was in our genetic structures that we had through that system that we had. And because that was the invisible, the early connectors did not believe that we had a system or a society. They thought we were just nomadic. It was people. So you can see now that, again, I'm glad we only got a couple of questions, Braden, but places like universities are opportunities, and opportunities like this are there to say Aboriginal knowledge is still relevant today. As a matter of fact, I go into, when I talk to areas like this and we have these structures, we have in a leadership process what we call the 7 levels on the pyramid that takes you into a structure of leadership. We take that pyramid 7 and we put them into circles. You take 3 circles, entwine those 3 circles, there's your 7 levels. So Robert and I worked with some people who are very good at delivering these high-end workshops for very important and high-profile people around the world. We're able to equate their structures to a structure of Aboriginal knowledge that existed but not appreciated. So I firmly believe that now universities, the first ones that'll say, we want to take this Aboriginal way of doing things and let's accredit it into the systems that we have, I firmly believe we'll get the best outcomes.
Thanks, Richard. On leadership, I want to reflect on that a little bit. So in academia, it's in kind of Western academia, it's a lot about titles, the grants you win, how much you publish. I think when you think about Noongar leadership or Aboriginal leadership more generally, it's did you show up when it mattered? Did you speak up when it was hard? And can you still walk with your head held high in community? There's that. So for a lot of Indigenous academics, not only are the Western kind of metrics, but also we have community metrics. Are there differences between Indigenous ways of leading that non-Indigenous folk can learn from, do you think? And what are the key takeaways you'd like to share?
Do you want to go first?
Do you want to go first, Chloe?
Well, with the diagram, or the leadership, we have 4 diagrams, and we can use a triangle of this because it takes it a Western sense. With that triangle, if you face it this way with the circle in front of it, that means you're leading a group and you're the circle in front. If you got the triangle that way and the circle's behind it, that means you're a leader, but you've got groups in front of you that's going. And you're guiding them, you know. And of course, if you've got the triangle and you're on top, that means just like the president, you're on top, but you've got structures where you're leading that area. Then you've got the bottom part of the triangle. When you're underneath the triangle, then you're holding up. So a leader's got to be at least 4 of those. You can't be just one. You can't be on top all the time and say, I'm the president, everything can happen. There's times you've got to get down and help and be at the bottom and hold morals and hold standards and have those hard questions. You've got to hold them up at that stage. Then there's other times you've got to be an innovative. You've got to be at the front and say, I'm here for innovation, and we're here to make sure that innovation is safe. So I'm bringing everyone with me in this innovation once I know it's safe. Then you've got the other one that's saying, I am a leader because I'm holding the old standards, the old morals. They still count at the back of things, and that's pushing that. So I hope I haven't confused you with the descriptions, but that shows you that a leader doesn't just have one role. So it's like that flock of birds, and you need a team around you to make sure that that leadership is flexible. We're blessed, and I use that with particularly myself and Robin and our family, because there's times when we sit back and let the young ones, our children, show us this way of doing things. They're actually leading us, particularly when it's the technology and that sort of stuff. And I couldn't believe, and I'll tell you another little story, because life's full of stories. We had 4 stations on a walk on country, along a river walk, 4 stations, and there's 3 of us. And Alton and Rakita, my son and daughter, says, we got it covered. I said, Almond's up at number 1, so my oldest son was at number 1. So this is us doing a family presentation. And I said, but there's 5 stations and there's 4 of us. I said, there's 4 of us and there's 5 stations. We got it covered. I went to one tree and it had a QR code. And I said, what's going to happen here? They grabbed the phone and they went click on the phone, and all of a sudden on everyone's phone, there was a link to 2 elders speaking in this place here. Technology, I had no idea it existed. So those who are young would understand what I'm talking about. Those who are older, it was amazing. Ask the young one what a QR code can do in an education. We didn't need a person there. That QR took care of that story. So that's leadership. So you can see that leadership is not just defined by being up the front and having a lot of scars. It's also some of the sitting back and having the rewards as well. So it's a very hard thing to define leadership, but it's ever evolving, like Clothilde was saying. Leadership evolves, people evolve, and I firmly believe the only thing really about leadership is that you're a communicator. You can get your message across, and the simpler way of getting your message across, the better it is. If you can communicate in any way, shape or form, you're a leader.
Okay.
I would say I'm probably deeply uncomfortable with any mantle of leadership that might be talked about, but I think the reasoning for that is because when I think about leadership for me is about service to community. So in exactly what Richard has said, oftentimes when you're servicing community, you will lead from the back, and you're not actually leading, you're walking in tandem with a bunch of people. So that's really what probably characterises anything I might call leadership is service to community. And what that means when you're servicing a community, whether it be big or small, is that you're listening and you're doing more listening rather than talking. And sometimes you have to make difficult decisions.
Thanks, Chloe. And look, I guess sometimes when you're an Aboriginal person in a non-Indigenous organisation, which many of us are, you have two bosses. You've got the bosses at home and the bosses in the office. Hey, Claire. Okay, over to Q&A for you guys. So I might go and see if there's any questions on live stream first, just because people online tend not to get the opportunities. So I just want to check with the crew up the back. Is there any questions? We'll do audience first. Any questions from the audience? Yeah, just in the front. Nikki's coming with a roving mic.
Hello, my name's Shakayla Walley. Hi, Pop Richard. I'm Lorraine's granny. I had a question about, it comes back to the Welcome to Country as well. Just as mob, and I'm sure I'm not alone in thinking of this, dealing with the lateral violence that we experience in community as well with Welcome to Countries, and particularly online in the last sort of 12 months to 18 months. What advice would you give to us to combat that and really try and set the record straight and support our elders and all the work that you have done to, as you say, we're a dynamic culture, to forefront us in modern settler Australia? Combating that lateral violence, because it can be quite a lot to carry in community each day.
So the question around lateral violence. So lateral violence, the idea that it's kind of in community conflict around who gets to do what and say what. Rich, any thoughts?
First of all, you got to remember that those who are practicing lateral violence, they have an issue and a problem that dies 2 hours after they die. So it's going to stay ingrained in them. There's something that's not you. It's their own issues that they have, and they try to reach out to get other people who have got those issues to say, we have this problem. And what I normally say to people is that you'll always hear the bad news. Johnny Cash did a fantastic song, bad news travel like wildfire and good news travel slow and all this sort of. So anything that's on a negative will always come up first. The positives are mostly we call the silent majority. And I firmly believe that the majority are starting now not to be silent. So it's exactly what we're talking about now. In the past, the power of communication was in the medias that were controlled by corporations that had agendas. Now we've got different media connects. We've got communications that they can't control. So I firmly believe that the common decency is starting to rise. I firmly believe that. I think Australia's a decent place. What reinforced it for me is that during the elections and upcoming elections, we had all the issues in elections. One of the biggest advocates who didn't want welcome to country, didn't want to stand in front of the flag, didn't believe in the voice, didn't get elected in his own electorate, and he was the leader of an opposition. And some of these very fiery people didn't. So Australia spoke. The silent majority spoke. And what did Albanese did when he first met? He stood in front of the flag and he did the welcome and they did the smoking ceremony, all that. So I believe in karma again. That's just my way. Because I believe what we've got, you do a survey in the audience, 97% of people want to know what's happening today. How am I going to finish my day? How are the family? All of that. Only very few wake up and says, well, what are the Aboriginals doing today? Those who wake up, what the Aboriginals do today, they wake up tomorrow. What are the Aboriginals doing today? They're not worried about what can I do today. So when the lateral violence, just have a little bit of a laugh every now and then. Because, again, another little story. When I was a young fella, my aunt, who was a very clever woman, she saw the silly fella going off in the garden, and he pointing gun, and she said, "My boy, aren't you glad you're not him? Let them be, you be. We can't stop it on the media, but don't wear it and don't take it personal." Again, we appeal to the common decency, and we're a decent country. And like Clay said, there's racism here. It's ingrained racism, we know that, but there's also prejudice here. And if you look at the things that we're challenging, we're working on what we call systematic change. And if we went to systematic change today, it'll be different to when it was setting up those systems 50 and 60 years ago. So 50 and 60 years ago, you would have one advocate for women, Edith Cowan. Who else is in the parliament? She's with all men. So you can see how things are changing now. So all those acts in the past were done mostly by, white men. Now we have different women that are coming into the parliament. And I used to have this little measuring stick to say, gee, I'm glad the women got into parliament, and I'm glad the women got on this board now, because where the women break through, the Aboriginals will follow. And you'll find that the women get there first, you get the vote, we'll get a vote later. You get on the Football Commission, we got an Aboriginal on the Football Commission after we got a woman. So, thank goodness for the women. And us being matriarchal in the Aboriginal world, it doesn't worry us if the women go first. Yeah.
Thanks, Richard. The racism point's a really interesting one. One of my favourite comments I got on social media was somebody who said, "We didn't have this racism thing. Aboriginal people and people of colour got in a room one day and invented it." And so that's how it came about. What a fantastic invention for ourselves.
Just another quick comment on that. You'd always find that those who say there's no racism here, well, I have this little program we have, and we do this at a workshop, and you can always tell because it's one word in English that tells where you stand. It's only one word, and that's called but. I like you, but. I'm not a racist, but. The moment the but comes in, you know exactly where people stand. This is a great conversation, but.
We ran a workshop not that long ago in an organisation, and we were talking about this. Oh, this race, is it really a thing? And I said, how many of you have a racist family member? Not one person couldn't put their hand up. They all did. And I thought, well, it's coming from somewhere, it's not as if it's made up. Any other questions from the group? Down the front, Asha.
No worries. Can you hear me? Thank you so much, panel. That was really beautiful. And hi, Pop. I'm Nana Jo's granny, so nice to see you. My question's around self-determination. And I think for me, being an Indigenous woman in a university, we're navigating that cultural interface. We're navigating the two worlds. We've got the two bosses. We've got that accountability to the Western frameworks, but our accountability to our people and our mob too. Where does self-determination sit in that? What defines self-determination, especially in a space where we are, our voices aren't often heard or aren't the first voices heard? So how does that look?
I sort of have a bit of a problem with what's called self-determination because actually it's very individualised and that's not the way we think. We think in a communal sense. So it's what is best for our community, what benefits our community, what allows us to thrive and have impact as a community. So I think that is the change, first of all, that in fact it's not self-determination, it's community determination. So I think that's one thing. And secondly, we don't have to ask permission, actually. We don't have to ask permission. We're sovereign people who stand in our own space and who can just go, this is actually what I'm doing. And if I can be naughty and sort of say that is sort of how the cultural narrative kind of came about in the sense that Braden, didn't ask for permission, but when this is something that's needed, this is something that actually will support our entire university position and community, and this is an act of community determination. And so this is what's happening, and it happened, and it's thriving, and people are embracing it, and there is nothing scary about it. And so I think we have to, not. I know I'm talking about in an abstract sense, not at university, as I've found being new in this environment, boy, oh boy, do you have to go through a lot of hoops and bureaucracy and asking. So I don't mean in that sense, but I think we have to stop seeing ourselves as putting out, little thing out going, please, sir, can I have some more? Like, we've got to change how we see ourselves. I've got my brother sitting up there. He's a DVC. I've got my nephew sitting here, DVC. These people have risen despite all the things and did not ask for permission and are now determining, really big ideas and concepts and things that sit in a place that where everyone else sits. So I think that, that's probably my answer. It's probably not a good answer, but it's the only answer I have.
Thanks, Chloe. Any other questions? There's one just here. Thanks, Nikki. I think the point about permission is interesting. It's okay if the permission is equally asked. And I think sometimes in Indigenous spaces, there's extra permissions required, moving people through discomfort and nervousness. So it is that kind of moving in a quick way sometimes, yeah. Sorry, the question was over here somewhere.
Thank you. Yes, Anna Trinwith. Thanks so much. This has been such a wonderful conversation. I guess for those of us who are sitting here and trying to understand how we might translate this cultural narrative framework into our areas and maybe thinking or hesitant about how or where we start, what would your advice be to us in really moving forward?
Come and have a yarn. Just that. Because there's going to be so many different ideas that we're already embracing, but that, the whole thing about this is it's collaborative. It is more, it's ecosystem. It's using these relationships that we all have to leverage to create something far greater than like the sum of its parts. So by all means, come and have a yarn. Is it okay to talk about, I've got a cultural coordinator coming on, who's going to undertake sort of a lot of this, I guess, the grunt work and support me because I've been doing all of that amongst many other things. So come and have a yarn because we can talk about, okay, how does this fit in from a very practical sense? Like, how would this work? If you and the best thing I think is to think about it as almost as project-based. So, using, I'm sorry to put you in this, Liz, but it's so good. Like, or people in culture, even Tilly's here somewhere. Where's Tilly? There she is. So the behavioural framework from people in culture is an amazing example as well of how they've grabbed a key concept or a core kind of thing and gone, this is how we're going to use the cultural narrative as the lens, and it feeds through that way. Liz has used it for orientation as a mapping exercise, so students go through the different stages or the different layers. There's a million ways you can apply it, but I think the best way, as we've been doing with these guys, is to come and have a yarn and then we can flesh it out.
Okay, conscious of time, so I'm going to steal the last question. Now, Richard and Chloe, I'm really interested thinking about talking to a future Aboriginal student who's going to come to ECU 30 years from now. They're standing out the front of the city campus at ECU. Given this work and the stuff that we've talked about, what do you want them to see, to feel, and to know was made possible by this kind of conversation? In 30 years' time, what do you want them to see, feel, and think?
I think very serious first. They'll say Fremantle's won 10 flags. I won't show my alliance there, but just... I'm terrible for future predictions because I always find that our culture is based in the present. And 30 years ago, if someone said to me, you had a mobile phone, I'd say, what are you talking about? But the cartoons had them. 30 years ago, those who are old as I am, and not many in this room are, remember Dick Tracy had a watch that he can speak into. Yeah. So forward projection. We've got to watch a speaker now. We thought, go back and just Google those who don't know who Dick Tracy is. Go back to the old cartoons when it was in the past. So that there was some forward projections and just I've got a couple of mates here who play basketball, my nephew. Just to give a little history on this. Basketball was played with a medicine ball and a peach bucket. So the idea was to chuck it around and get it into the peach bucket, okay? Then someone came up with a brilliant idea of putting a hole in the peach bucket so that they don't have to get the ball out of the bucket all the time. But that took a couple of more years. Then after that, someone came up with an idea, hey, why don't we get a net and put that net under the bucket so that when the peach ball goes in, rather than falling on the ground, we can get the stick and knock it back out again. So this evolved into that. Then someone come up and said, hang on, well, why don't we get this ball that bounces a bit more rather than the heavy one? So it took years to evolve. Then someone came up with a backboard to allow, and the backboard came up. So this goes over 10 to 15 years. You can, those who research, Google this. Then finally someone came up with an idea, hang on, why don't we cut a hole in the net so that it'll slow it down and it'll fall down slowly? So you can see things evolve from not forward projection and say, well, in 60 years' time, we're going to have these shoes that can bounce and we can all dunk. So my view is in 30 years' time, an Aboriginal student standing outside a university saying, my culture matters because we've made a difference to this society by accepting some of the narratives and some of the codes and some of the practices that my people have been doing for thousands of years. Now, 30 years after today, that's relevant. So I firmly believe the moment universities embrace, right back to the first question, passive learning, skills-based transitions, I think we're heading in that direction because now there are practical applications.
That's good to know. I'm not sure whether shoes that can make me dunk in 30 years or Dockers winning 10 flags is more delusional, but I'll see which one it is.
Hey. Mine is really simple. I feel like the question has to be from the other way. I hope an Aboriginal student comes to any university and finds it streamless, finds kindness, respect, and doesn't even notice anything else. But I think the question from the other side is, in 30 years' time, did we evolve our responsibilities to one another and to this community at this university, and did we create a more equitable and inclusive space in measurable ways? And if the answer to both of those is yes, then we've done our job.
Brilliant. I'm going to wrap us up there. I know we have some online questions, but I think what we'll do is endeavour to come back to them and as part of our wrap-up. So I appreciate everyone's engagement online, just conscious of time. Can we just give Chloe and Richard a round of applause? So really important that I thank the corporate events team, particularly Rebecca at the back and Chloe, who did a really amazing job. So please thank the team. Also want to thank Tracy from Kurungkul, even though she told me not to thank her, I'll still thank her anyway. Finally, I want to thank you who have joined us here tonight. Really appreciate it. I hope you've taken away some interesting insights from the conversations. I'm sure you have. Please keep an eye on the details of our next event, which will be held on the 27th of August at ECU's Mount Lawley campus. I really appreciate having you both here. I love working with you both and I have a great deal of respect, and I'm so grateful that you are part of what we do here at ECU. So,
can we also please thank our wonderful MC, Braden Hill?
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening.